Argentines are people identified with the country of Argentina. This connection may be residential, legal, historical or cultural. For most Argentines, several of these connections exist and are collectively the source of their being Argentine. Argentina is a multi-ethnic and multilingual society, home to people of various ethnic, religious, and national origins, with the majority of the population made up of Old World immigrants and their descendants. As a result, Argentines do not equate their nationality with ethnicity, but with citizenship and allegiance to Argentina. Aside from the indigenous population, nearly all Argentines or their ancestors immigrated within the past 5 centuries. Among countries in the world that have received the most immigrants in modern history, Argentina, with 6.6 million, ranks second to the United States, and ahead of other immigrant destinations such as Canada, Brazil and Australia. Argentina is a multi-ethnic society, which means that it is home to people of many different ethnic backgrounds. Argentina is a melting pot of different peoples. In the mid-19th century, a large wave of immigration started to arrive in Argentina due to new constitutional policies that encouraged immigration, and issues in the countries the immigrants came from, such as wars, poverty, hunger, and famines. The main immigration sources were from Europe, the countries from the Near and the Middle East, Russia, and Japan. Eventually, Argentina became the country with the second largest number of immigrants in the period, with 6.6 million, second only to the United States with 27 million. Therefore, most Argentines are of European descent, and are either descendants of colonial-era settlers and or of the 19th and 20th century immigrants from Europe, with about 65% of the population being of ethnic European descent. The most common ethnic groups are a mix between Spanish, Italian and Native American. It is estimated that up to 30 million Argentines, up to 62.5% of the total population, have Italian ancestry, wholly or in part. There are also some Germanic, Slavic, Irish and French populations. Smaller Jewish, Arab, Asian, Romani and African communities contribute to the melting pot. Immigration of recent decades includes mainly Paraguayans, Bolivians and Peruvians, among other Latin Americans, Eastern Europeans, Africans and Asians. Large comprehensive studies across Argentina's many regions in order to characterize the genetic admixture have been lacking. Small sample size studies give the following composition. A team led by Daniel Korak conducted a study in 2009, analyzing 246 samples from 8 provinces and 3 different regions of the country. The results were as follows. The analysis of Y chromosome DNA revealed a 94.1% of European contribution, and only 4.9% and 0.9% of Native American and Black African contribution, respectively. Mitochondrial DNA analysis again showed a great Amerindian contribution by maternal lineage, at 53.7%, with 44.3% of European contribution, and a 2% African contribution. Argentines of total or partial European descent constitute the majority of Argentina's population. Ethnic Europeans include the Argentine descendants of colonists from Spain during the colonial period prior to 1810, and mainly of immigrants from Europe in the Great Immigratory Wave from the mid-19th century to the mid-20th century. No recent Argentine census has included comprehensive questions on ethnicity, although numerous studies have determined that European Argentines have been a majority in the country since 1914. Some international sources claim the European component of the population to be at around 97%. The most numerous immigrant European communities are Spaniards, Slavs, Finns, the French, the Irish, Portuguese, the Dutch, among others in smaller number. Within the population totals, there may be an imprecise amount of mixed mestizo population. In one of the most comprehensive genetic studies involving the population of Argentina, 441 Argentines from across the northeast, northwest, southern, and central provinces of the country It was observed that the sampled population comprised on average of 65% European, followed by 31% Amerindian, and finally 4% of African ancestry. However, this study was unweighted and meant to be a representation of the diversity of Argentine DNA rather than a demonstration of the average ethnic composition of the country. It was also found there were great differences in the ancestry amongst Argentines as one traveled across the country. A study by Daniel Korak that attempted to find the average Argentine ancestry by weighing the population of various regions gave a significantly higher estimate of European ancestry at 78.5% of the average Argentine's autosomal DNA. Contemporary native cultures are represented in the country mainly by the Mapuche, Kola, Wichi and Toba peoples. According to the provisional data of INDEC's Complementary Survey of N.